Hey Martha, welcome.
Hey Jay, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm going to give a brief intro about you and then I'll give you the opportunity to do a longer personal introduction.
Okay.
This is Martha Hansen, massage therapist, full spectrum energy healer and coach, massage teacher, and business owner now of two businesses.
Mhm.
The first is a private practice in Asheville, North Carolina called Aurora Energy Coaching and Massage. And just recently, Black Mountain Massage and Wellness in Black Mountain, North Carolina. So, yeah, how did you come to be a massage therapist, energy healer, teacher, and business owner in North Carolina?
Um, Sometimes it feels kind of random. I think life feels that way sometimes. I ended up going to massage school when I was about 24, and had like finished my BA degree, had traveled, had like gotten my first job outside the like serving industry that was like an administrative assistant that I was like very good at, and it had benefits and a salary. And I was like, I hate this.
Mm,
And kind of, made me be like, well, what do I want to do next? And had always kind of thought about massage. And then I feel like massage kind of finds people that way, where like you've either thought about it for years or you've never thought about it, and then you meet like five people and then you're in school and 2 weeks later. Like that's massage school kind of has that sort of like vibe to it. So ended up moving across the country from Idaho to actually go to the Center for Massage and Natural Health, and then stayed in Asheville kind of ever since. And then I would say that like my energy work and all the energy stuff kind of grew out of like I started doing massage and was like, I'm messing with something that I don't know what it is, and I
mm,
don't want to hurt people, which is a pretty common thing for therapists, especially new therapists, to not want to hurt people.
mhm.
And that kind of started my interest in just trying to learn about like what was energy even, and ended up in an online program that used a lot of information from the Rhys Thomas Institute, where I ended up going to school. And his initial draw was actually he has this whole profile system that's part of his like energy training. And I've always like I was a sociology major in college. I've always really liked how people like what makes people tick and how people work and that kind of social psychology groups individuals. And so like I've always really liked that kind of thing. And that's what initially kind of got me attracted. And then once I got into the energy world, was like, oh, here it is. Okay. It all connects. It all makes sense now. Um, yeah. And then I just I don't tend to work well for other people. I think that's maybe why I end up owning my own businesses, is that I think that there's a different or better way to do things. So, and private practice is such a common thing for people in the industry. But the latest one at Black Mountain Massage and Wellness just kind of like, I don't know, fell into my lap. I'm crazy. I don't know. It's like that's kind of what it feels like. I mean, I've always had ideas about how like that it's got to be possible to own a massage like establishment where other therapists are, you're hiring therapists and therapists are getting paid, but they're actually making like better money. I mean, massage is still a decent industry, even if you go work for, a more corporate place. But I've just had a lot of opinions and ideas and kind of curiosities about like, it seems like that has to be possible, but I don't know the total business side of everything. And living in Asheville, which is a very saturated market for massage therapy, I was like, why would I open a massage like clinic space in an area where there's like so much competition? I'll just do private practice. But Black Mountain's kind of this unique little, kind of bedroom community, and there's no other place in Black Mountain that has more than one therapist. And so I'm kind of getting to try out some of my ideas, which one of my biggest is that I really would like, uh, I would really like the industry to get away from like the tipping culture. It's
Hmm.
something that kind of drives me crazy. I'm not going to change American culture. I'm well aware of that. And we have such a tipping like standard in our culture, but it's when you work for someone else, the standard is you get paid some base rate as little as $10 an hour. And people don't know that they're
Mhm.
paying $150 for a massage and you're getting paid $10. You know, like they don't know that.
Mhm.
But then those organizations have done a really good job, honestly, of like normalizing a tip procedure in the business, which then means you're getting paid that gratuity on top of the wage that the company's paying you. But then the onus is it's just like in the restaurant world, the onus is like the person paying your wage is kind of the client.
Mhm.
Like, and then there's all this like energy around, you get angry if some client doesn't leave you a tip. And then even as a client, I worked in the industry for 12 years and I know the standard, but I get stressed out about thinking whether or not that therapist is going to think that I'm like stiffing them because I don't know what they're getting paid. But the truth is like, I might have $120 for a massage, but like 150 is like, just that kind of, I don't know, thing. I just think it creates a lot of kind of like unnecessary stress on all sides of the equation, even though it's become kind of a standard that is, again, I'm not going to change the American view on tipping, but in my own little bubble, I'm kind of wanting to do that. So I've set up a pay structure where it's like kind of gratuity is included in our pricing, but I even want to I wish I could just get away from even like talking about gratuity, just to be
Mhm.
like, come get a massage, $125. Your therapist is getting paid really well. They're getting paid over 50% of the service cost of the service. And then if you want to leave them a tip, you can, but it's actually like what a tip was intended to be, which is like a gratuity on top of like to really honor like great service. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that's maybe one of the biggest examples of just, I think it kind of excites me to open a place, and little things like that kind of across the boards that I haven't had a chance to actually be like, this is what I think about it. So that's what excites me. And then, yeah, I'm crazy because it's a lot of work, you know? So that was a very
Yeah.
long answer to your question, but
No, that's great. I appreciate all the background, and I really appreciate the tipping conversation as I'm getting ready to, start a business and think about pricing and how all of that works.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's much easier to do that in a private practice because you can, theoretically you're making 100% of what you charge.
Right.
But even then, I still educate my private practice clients. I still tell them that, I accept gratuity, but I don't expect it. I'd always rather they come get body work. I'm not going to be upset. Like literally
Yeah.
my rates are my rates, and I'll charge more if I need to charge more. And I would say maybe like 40 to 50% of my clients will still leave me a gratuity, which is great. Sometimes they leave me one, sometimes they don't, but I don't have any energy around it. You know what I mean? Like I'm not bitter or resentful. I'm not worried about paying my bills. They're not stressed out about whether or not I'm going to be stressed out. They don't give me a tip. It's just like, but it's easier to do that in private practice. So it's kind of a new thing to try to like create a culture of that.
Right. Right.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like my experience with it on the client side is typically like, it feels like if I don't leave at least 20%, whether it's like in a restaurant or a massage or
Yeah.
something, like I'm doing something really like,
Terrible.
yeah,
Yeah.
or like really criticizing their performance or
Yeah.
something. And then
Exactly.
it doesn't have any of the kind of like nice feel that I would like it
No.
to have. It's sort of just like
Yeah.
meeting a bare minimum
Yeah.
or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was thinking we could kind of split this up into 3 approximate sections of like body work and energy work, teaching, and then kind of like general career questions. So to really like start at the beginning with body work. So also just to give a little bit of our shared background, I know you from massage school. I went to Center for Massage and Natural Health in Asheville, and I kind of consider you the main teacher there. I think you taught about half of my curriculum, maybe even more, including Swedish, which is kind of the fundamental class. And in massage school and in body work in general, we talk about tension a lot. Whether usually muscle tension, sometimes fascia, maybe other types as well. And so just to start with like a really fundamental question, kind of how do you think about tension, what it is, a personal definition of it?
That's a good question. I guess I think of tension as any like physical or unphysical, emotional, energetic, like holding in,
Hmm.
right? Where there's a kind of a clamping down or a holding in, and it's not fluid and free and flowing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that might be true for a muscle tissue, that might be true for fascia, that might be true for emotions, that might be true for a lot of different things, but we create tension in all those different ways. And then as a body worker, I think that a lot of tension then gets reflected in our physical body that is legit in our physical body, like legit, there's like a trigger point or something, but that sometimes the reason that won't go away is because there's tension somewhere else that needs addressing as well.
And when you say somewhere else besides the physical body, what do you mean?
I think probably the most accessible is like mind, emotions, right, are probably two of the biggest things that anyone can relate to. Like they've got, and those are often even caused sometimes by situations that are maybe beyond our control or happening outside of the current environment. And then obviously the energy person in me gets into like, I also think there's an energy, but energy is also reflected, our mind and emotions. It's kind of all connected, even though it's all separate. I think I say this in energy work class where it's just like, it's everything and nothing. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's like, you kind of have to have that sort of attitude about it or else you just feel like overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's totally appropriate to just focus on one aspect of that,
Right.
And there's some people who they're not ready to actually focus on like the multidimensionality, and it's still a really beautiful benefit and great work for them to just be focusing on their physical tension. Right. And that's like a really beautiful thing that massage offers that is safe, and it's affecting those other things, but we're not having to like think about them or unpack everything.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it reminds me of sort of some classroom conversations that we had around like not bringing our own goals into the session and deciding what we want for a client, but kind of like listening to them and their goals and what they're ready to take on, and being okay with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we started to touch on energy a little bit. This is like one of the most helpful frameworks I've ever found. I've kind of like discovered it in the last couple of years, and I feel like it's helped me connect so many dots. It's like all these life experiences I had before that was like, what was happening there? And then it's like, oh, okay, yeah. It's like, it's not just about like the words people are saying or like,
Yeah.
But I also find it really difficult to come up with a definition for energy that I like. So I'm curious about your kind of like working definition for energy.
Yeah, I think that you've highlighted a challenge of it, because it's hard. We as humans these days, we have a hard time defining something we can't see, right? And so energy is something that like, I mean, some people can see it, right? But like as a society, like we're not all going to look like, now we'll all look and be like, yeah, there's a chair over there. Like we can all agree that's a chair. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's what makes like energy tricky, is because we can't see it. We sort of feel it or sense it or intuit it, or have different levels of consciousness or awareness around it. And I think that maybe for me, how do I think about, I guess if we get maybe sort of like largely metaphorical, like we go to my bigger kind of like scan out big picture, it's like personally I have a belief that like we all are connected, like all things, that's part of what energy is, that we're different permutations. Even if you get into physics, right, it's the periodic table of elements, and all things come from the periodic table of elements, right? So you can take that idea that it's like it's all the same building blocks, and then we put those building blocks together and they look different, but those building blocks are all connected and like woven together, and that's the energy, right? That we feel. We're like feeling some foundational like connection or vibration or essence or something, and you could get more spiritual or less spiritual about what that means to you as an individual. But I also guess I just have a pretty firm belief that like everything has an essence, everything has a spirit, everything has energy, whether it's a stagnant chair you're sitting on, it's still got a color, it's got a feeling, it creates some sort of experience when you interact with it. And that's kind of part of how I think I experience energy. It's not a great like definition of energy, because I do think it's really hard to like define something that we can't see and that we all experience in different ways, right? Because some people literally see it, some people feel it, some people hear it, some people, so it's this ephemeral, like, I don't know. I think maybe in like 200 years, everyone will just be like, oh yeah, that's like just as normal as like, you know, however many hundreds of years ago, we didn't believe that like atoms existed. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because we couldn't see them. And then we created technology where we could see them. So I think, I don't know, maybe another 200-300 years, we'll be at the place where society's like, haha, I remember that time when we didn't think this was real.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that definition. And I also like that I feel like a lot of people kind of talk about all living things, you know, when it comes to energy. So I think it's cool that your definition kind of includes everything inanimate and alive.
Yeah, well, you know, if you get into like quantum physics, right, which some scientists say it's quack, some whatever, but quantum physics is actually like the solid chairs that you and I are sitting on are actually more space than they are solid, right? So they're actually not, like, things aren't as solid as they look like they are, because there's more, you know, the space is the energy almost. And that's where like we have the ability to impact solid things on like an energetic level, because they're really not solid, right? But that's kind of like your brain, even me saying it, your brain is kind of like, what? Like that doesn't make sense, you know? It's like a brain stretch. And that's kind of what, you know, quantum physics is or does. It's getting down to these like microscopic, you know, things. And so of course that's got an energy and a spirit. And, you know, I laugh about technology. This is, I'm sure there's many people out there who know this, of like, you know, people who affect technology, like just them being around things, like things go off or on, or, you know, and it's like, all it takes to mess up a computer is to flip a 0 to a 1, right? Just somewhere you just, and there's a lot of space. And it's like, I truly believe, I personally have had that experience. I know people who've had practitioners who've had clients that like literally like the power goes off in their building every time the person shows up. It's like, you know, like, I don't know, why is that happening?
Yeah, there are even specific places in Asheville that I've heard like, the energy is real weird in there. There's all kinds of like weird electrical failures and like, yeah,
exactly. So I don't know. That even the non-animate is still, you know, animate in a way that's very different than how you and I are animate, obviously, but it's all made from the same building blocks.
I really like the phrase that you said, the space is the energy. That's cool. So I have received energy work from a couple practitioners, and they were not people who had studied it formally. They were kind of people who had just like discovered that they had some kind of gift there and kind of like leaned into it, and maybe like some self-study, or maybe like an informal mentor or something, or a formal mentor, but just outside of a formal education. And then when I met you and heard about the Rhys Thomas Institute where you studied, that was when I realized that there are formal programs for energy work. So how you mentioned that when you started massage that you kind of realized you were getting into something that you didn't fully understand and you didn't want to be hurting people. How did you go from that point to deciding that you wanted to study energy work formally? And then how did you choose the Rhys Thomas Institute?
Again, kind of another one of those you're just like following the crumbs that kind of life gives you. You know, I actually think I remember a couple, like going to a used bookstore and just like looking at this section and just like, what are some titles of like, you know, things? Because the way that I remember thinking about it myself as a practitioner is that when I started practicing on my own, I'd had student clinic and everything, but when I was, you know, in my own in an office, I knew that I was like, my massage was really good and people really liked my massage. But the reason that they liked my massage, I knew that there was something happening other than just my massage techniques. And I didn't know what that was. Like, I didn't get that in school the same way that you have, even, right? That wasn't something that we talked about. I didn't know what my presence was. I didn't know what, you know, I think it started with just like almost like I remember reading a chapter where that was the first time I'd ever read about like a grounding cord, just like how do you keep your own space, you know what I mean? How do you not end up back and forth with someone else? And then, yeah, I just feel like I ended up doing a program with a woman called Margaret Lynch, she's does some different things, but I was way into EFT and emotional freedom technique, which I still use with coaching clients and myself, but did a program with her, and she was actually at the time dating Rhys. And so she used a lot of his stuff in her program. And that was kind of what led me to, it was a lot of personal development too, actually, if I'm like really honest. Well, yeah, is that there was, yeah, we can go here. Is that I also personally at that time, so like right after massage school, there's so much learning that happens just when you're 24 in general. And then also when you go through massage school, and, like my life kind of fell apart a little bit, like a relationship was failing, and I was struggling for my purpose. I didn't, it was really challenging. And I ended up in a probably a year or so out of like actually hitting a point where it's like, oh, I think I'm like seriously struggling with like real depression, like depression that needs like medication, which was like a really big deal for me to be like, I'm not a huge fan of, medication, but at the same time, it saves people's lives. It's really wonderful. And so when I finally got on like the right antidepressant that helped me like come a little bit out of the fog to like deal with things, it became really clear to me that like the feelings and the stuff that I've been struggling with had really been with me from like, middle school. And so while this was maybe the first time in my collective life that like I'd had a diagnosis or had someone call it depression, and it got bad enough where it was like impacting my day-to-day life, is that like, I did not want to take antidepressants for the rest of my life. I was like very clear about that. But I was like, I can't not take them if I don't do the psycho, spiritual, emotional, physical work to clean up whatever it is that makes this happen in me, right? And so I kind of feel like from there, I was just on kind of a bend for like personal growth to a certain degree, and things that made me feel, more like myself, helped me get into like gritty areas of things that I hadn't looked at before. And that was a lot of the program, both with Margaret and then, a lot of Rhys's. I mean, he'll tell you it's a third energy medicine, it's a third profile, and then it's just straight up personal development, because you shouldn't be able, like, not shouldn't, this is true even with massage, is like, in order to be a clean vessel for others, you got to clean up some of your own shit, right? And so there was a real intentionality in the school that I had heard of before his is the Barbara Brennan School of energy, and her program was even more that way. Like I'd met a graduate from there that I had talked with a year or two before, and it was like they were required to get X amount of certain types of bodywork sessions. They were like, they had all this different kind of stuff, because it's like this holistic kind of, okay, you really want to deal with this, you're gonna have to like, you take care of it in yourself first, because that's how you hold a clean field to help others. So yeah, I think it was, in some ways it was personal, honestly. And I didn't ever really think that I wasn't sure that I'd ever have a table practice. And I didn't try to have a table practice right after I finished my energy training. And then it's been like, it took a couple years, I almost think, for me to integrate all those experiences and to like come into some of my own before I was ready to actually start, doing it as a table practice and having it integrated more fully, because I had to make sense of it all myself. Really, I think that's what happened when I look back on it. Yeah.
So it was like 2 or 3 years, the program?
The program is 3 years.
And then another couple of years after of kind of integrating all of that. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, just for context, the massage program that you teach and that I did is 7 months. So that's extensive. Yeah. And that's 7 months part-time.
Yeah. Yeah. And the energy program is like definitely part-time. It was like 1 weekend a month plus a bunch of like time in between, because I would travel up to the Boston area. I think he's been doing it virtually the last couple of years because of COVID. And there would be a lot of homework and touch-ins and stuff in between each of those like month and a halves. And then you do like a 4-day intensive essentially. Okay. And so there's a lot of time and travel, but you're just in the way the program was structured is that we would go by chakra. So it's like every year you go through all 7 chakras in a school year. And there was reading and different levels of things, different healings that you learned for kind of each one of those energy centers. And it was like, it meant that when you were in chakra 1, like everything in chakra 1 in your life was like, like you were like hyper focused under a microscope. And so it was like, there'd be these, it was like every fall for 3 years, chakras 1, 2, and 3 were just like, oh my gosh, I hate the fall so much. And you get to like January and you get to go up to the heart chakra and we'd all be like, oh, thank heavens. We need this,
Wow.
So
Yeah.
there's kind of a pattern to that definitely like, directed life for kind of 3 years of, it's a very different, thing to do. And I'm sure there are people who do energy training that's not that long or extensive, but I thought it was a good way to do it personally. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. It sounds like a lot of intense life synchronicities for better or for worse. Yeah.
But yes, that you could probably sum my life up that way. A lot of intense life synchronicities for better or for worse. That's maybe what should go on my tombstone. Here lies Martha. She had a lot of intense life synchronicities.
Yeah, so you mentioned your table practice with energy work. I was looking at the site for your Aurora energy coaching, and your service menu includes massage, chakra balance, bodywork, and then full spectrum healing and coaching. Could you talk a little bit about what each of those is, how they're different, and then how like a new client coming to you would decide which one's right for them?
Oh, that's great. Yeah. So we'll start with the one that's probably most understood, which is just the body work, right? It's I would say that I do intuitive, like deep tissue massage, probably, although not all my clients are deep tissue. And deep tissue to me isn't just about pressure. It's about like how you're interacting, how you're working with the body for like a release, but it's people who are there for like a deeper release. And that's pretty straight up. And I would definitely say even within the context of body work, I have clients who are more interested in, what's the right, like, how does it feel to me? Their systems are more open for a little bit more of like an intuitive, it has like energy, but it doesn't have like the formal training. It just has that way that two people like open up and interact, that they're a little bit more open for that, like kind of just beyond the physical. And it's not something we ever almost talk about. It's just like something that, that's what they're looking for in a therapist. And that's something that I can provide. And we don't, there's not a whole lot of discussion about it. To people who are just more like, they're just there for the body, they're there to take care of their body and they're there for the body work. And there's that other thing that's like really lovely, but we're not, it's just separate, if that makes any sense. Yep. And I like doing all of them, both of them actually. All of that has a fun, or just, it's the variety is good, I guess. The chakra balance body work is kind of it's actually taken me a lot of years to figure out how I felt comfortable combining the two, like explicitly, because again, I think it's really impossible for us to not, our energy has an impact on our massage, right? And, you cannot be consciously like channeling energy the way I would in a full spectrum healing, but you're still in a healing modality. You still got helper guides and healer guides, like you still have guidance that's helping you in your massage, right? And some people would call that energy, but that's still there. So it's taken me quite a while to figure out how to blend the two in a way that felt good. And it was almost like, I guess by accident, but I've had full spectrum healing coaching clients that I've done a lot of full spectrum healing with, who then will also get body work at times. And more than once, I've had a couple of them come for a session, whether it was massage or energy work. And it was kind of like in the session, it was like, you kind of need both. Do you know what I mean? Let me do a chakra balance and then some body work. And doing the energy work before the massage opens the body up in a totally different way. Mostly I just do a chakra balance. It's like the basic, like you can't mess you can't mess anyone up with chakra balance. You know what I mean? Like it's a pretty clean, it's just kind of like it's an energy tune up for your system. We don't talk a whole lot, like we don't do a lot of coaching or anything in that combo session, but we do, I do always ask people if they have an intention that they'd like to hold, because we're kind of bringing in this like energy work. It's like, we're going to make it a little bit more explicit. Like, what is the intention besides just like that sore place in your neck that you'd like to have moved? And most people have something that they, it comes really easy to them, whether it's clarity or, they have something. And so that's part of what gets called into the session. And then the body work that follows it, the sessions either allow for like 20 to 30 minutes of body work, 50 to 60, or like 60 to 80. The body's just open in a different way, and it's a different experience of body work for me. I do believe that there are people, I have someone that I'm thinking about right now who I've worked with relatively regular with the chakra balance. And it's like, the body work actually helps her body integrate the energy work. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And she's like way into the energy work and isn't super into, like, she doesn't want to talk about it a lot, but like just doing the energy work's like really powerful. But if I were to have just left her after that, I feel like it wouldn't. And then when I do body work following it, I can feel that by the end of it, it's like wrapped this package around her in a different way, where it's like, we got really good body work in, but there's also something that feels a little bit more complete or holistic, and kind of sending her like physical form back out into the world, ready to like deal with things. Because energy work is very grounding, I think, at the highest level. I haven't ever had someone on my table who doesn't need grounding of some sort, myself included, right? And then the full spectrum healing has more coaching in it. So in a 90-minute session, we do more of a, like, in general, you can come just for one session, but people get the most benefit out of that if we do like a series, like at least 4. Those can be every week, they can be spread out once a month, but where you're kind of building on something. So we set some goals and intentions of just like, what is it that you're wanting to shift and change? And if you've ever had the experience of like this, I think this is why I like energy so much too, is that, and there's other modalities that do the same thing, where it integrates like the brain and the body, so we can sit and talk and have really clear mental and conscious understanding that this is like what needs to happen or what is happening. But then when you tune into your body is not on board. Your body's like, no, something different is happening, right? Or I'm not ready to do this next thing. And you can also do it vice versa, where your body is like, oh, we want to do this thing. And your mind is like, no, like not happening. And so the coaching is a little bit more helping integrate those two. So there's conscious communication, because that is important. That's part of how we shift things. We got our mind and our beliefs. And I have a handful of different like body-based exercises like EFT or, different things like that will sometimes come up before we do the energy healing, to just help integrate thoughts and beliefs that are blocking us from where you want to be, where you're going, where you want to go. And then I have maybe like 30 different healings that are like standardized healings. And so there always will be it's a different healing every time. And that healing is based off of supporting the conversation, right? Or where you're at. So it's not just the balance. It's like everything from like, I've got a past life healing that we do, to like a life purpose, to an opening to wisdom, to like a fibromyalgia. It's like it's kind of across the boards of like, what's the thing, what kind of energy work would be most supportive of this like area that you're leaning into this month or this week right now.
And that's a wider like range of possible healings than the chakra balance. Okay.
Yeah, much so, like a much wider range. Every once in a while, if it's someone I'm working with for a while in the chakra balance and we've got that good rapport, we'll do a different healing at the beginning, but mostly the chakra balance is what works there, if that makes sense. So that was also another long answer, but does that give you an idea of how they're different?
Yeah, for sure. And it's just like, it's such an amazing range. I don't know, as somebody who's starting out, like, hoping to soon open a massage practice, it's like kind of, it's amazing to me to have the range of like being able to do body work at that level, energy work, and then also just like kind of coaching and conversational. So
thanks. I
Yeah.
definitely did not start out there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, the chakra balance service is pretty new, right?
it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is
Cool.
pretty new, which was, yeah, the same thing. I've just been feeling like, how can I make this accessible for someone that doesn't know what it is, but isn't necessarily interested? They're just not at a place. They're not wanting the coaching part of it, you know?
Yeah.
And it's been a great little addition, I guess. Yeah.
And then the full spectrum, would that ever include body work, or is it the healings and the coaching?
It's the healings and the coaching. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I don't ever actually, if for some reason I'm working with someone that it feels like we actually need to do some body work, I'm not always the right person to do body work on them, because of the dual roles. So I'll either tell them they need to go get body work, like clearly your body needs a massage. Here are some resources to go get a massage. Or if it's someone that's kind of a dual client that's popped back and forth, we'll just make a choice to schedule their next session as a different service.
Yeah.
To be like, okay, it seems like this is what you need next time. But, like, although, like I said, every once in a while, like that's how the chakra balance came to exist, is that I've had clients show up and I'm like, so clearly you need some body work today and you need a little energy work. But that's like, the few people that I've been working with for a year and a half, or you know what I mean? Like we've had a pretty long, kind of varied relationship with pretty clear boundaries on around all this stuff that made it like feel good for both of us to do that. Yeah.
Nice. Do you have a favorite type of session, whether it's a type of service or like a type of problem that comes up to work with?
I think that it's really probably the energy work and the coaching is like my favorite, because I'm really like, I've always been kind of fascinated in, and I really love being a part of someone's empowerment process. And I feel like that's kind of one of the things that I coach around, right? It's what I teach around, right? Is kind of self-empowerment and presence, and, watching someone bloom into more of themselves is something that like I get a lot of like joy, and like I get a lot of good things back from that. And the coaching kind of allows that more than the other two services. It's not that it doesn't happen with the other two, but it's just people are signing up a little bit more intentionally or consciously, for that to happen. And what I think is so interesting is like, especially if someone does like 4 sessions over 4 months, right? It's so easy for us to like lose track of how much we have grown or changed. And I think that's sometimes where a coach can be really helpful, is this like that. I feel like that's something that I get to do, is I get to remind people of just being like, so 4 months ago when we started, like you literally had no communication with your family. You had this and that, and then like you just got back from a trip visiting them. Like that's some big change, but I think that we forget that that's like, because that's kind of energy work, kind of this subtle thing. And so I think that's the most fun for me. And it's just really fun for me to watch people be empowered. Like ideally you don't need a good coach after a certain point.
Yeah.
In that same way, is because they're actually like setting you up to be able to like stand on your own and offer your gifts and your services and your wisdom to the world in the way that you get to. And that might not be a business, that might just literally be by the way that you parent or how you treat someone at the checkout line at the grocery store. That's something that I feel like is probably like an overarching kind of passion or goal in kind of who I am that drives that. And so the coaching is, it's like I can do that pretty much like not in my sleep, but it's like if I'm really busy and I've got a day that's got a bunch of that on my schedule, I don't feel, I'm like, oh, okay, great, I get to do that today. I don't have to kind of be like, all right, I like my massage work or whatever, but it's a little different physical toll on the body too.
Right.
Because massage is a physical toll on the body. So
yeah, I love that process of transformation that you're describing. If I'm not mistaken, that's what Aurora means. The word.
Yeah, the dawn or beginning of something new.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, I'm curious if the chakra balance that you described, is that something that you could kind of explain, give an explanation of what's happening there, or is it
Hmm.
hard to talk about?
Well, I mean, like I can talk about the technicality. It's like, so full spectrum healing is a chakra based healing system. There's healing systems that are chakra based, healing systems that aren't. And so there's 7 primary chakras. A chakra balance is literally you like start at the bottom, and you're sending an intention, a color, you're holding the vibration of chakra 1 for the feet, the legs, and then you hold chakra 1 and you're offering energy essentially. Um, and then you go from connect 1 to 2, connect 2 to 3. So you're connecting the whole system up. The way that I do the healing is, oftentimes, I mean, it's very intuitive. It's like I'll have to stop and like sometimes like fill 2 up, or like it's kind of okay. If you think like ideally our chakras are like spinning discs of light that are like spinning one direction, in like an open area, bringing in and taking out energy. And so it's kind of like you're cleaning those out. You're getting them spinning the right direction. You're giving them, space to move again. You might be filling them up with some like, vibrations or energy that helps them take care of themselves, and then kind of connecting the system together. I would say a chakra balance is also like, it's a very grounding healing for most people, partly because most people, like our society kind of teaches us to like leave our bodies a little bit. So, kind of getting anchored back down into 1 and 2 and 3, and then kind of having that connected can feel really, can create like a little bit more safety in someone's system, or just a little bit more like spaciousness, in kind of how you're moving through the world. So that was kind of a so description of what's happening.
Yeah,
because there's so much, even for me when I
Yeah.
actually do energy healing, like there's so much that's happening that like I don't really know what's happening.
Yeah.
Honestly, I at least not at this point in my career. I don't have psychic sight. I'm not like seeing things. I'm not having a bunch of like direct conversations with my guides. They're there, and I have ways that I'm interacting, but it's like, it's more like I get a feeling that like I am not supposed to move yet. That's what, and I don't necessarily know what's happening. I can make guesses or feel certain things, but it's like I don't 100% know what's happening. And then even then, what my experience of the healing is doesn't matter. It's what the
Right.
person on the table's experience is that matters, because it's their system, and it's what does it mean to them. And every once in a while I'll get really clear about like, oh, I have something I need to share with this person, or a question I need to ask them, but I don't know what's happening half the time. So
Yeah, it's super nice that you talk about that openly, because I'm much more likely to trust an energy worker who talks about that than somebody who's like, I have 100% understanding of exactly what's happening in an energy
yeah,
session. But yeah, we talked a little bit earlier about, like you said, like, yeah, people can't really see it. Well, some people can see energy, some
yeah,
people can hear it, some people can
yeah,
feel it, like, and I know it doesn't necessarily fit neatly like within a sense store, but yeah, I kind of think of these different sense stores that we have, like the common senses that people talk about, and then energy potentially as like its own, or like
yeah,
potentially kind of fitting into. So I'm curious. You
yeah.
mentioned having these intuitions.
Yeah, so
Um,
I would call that, and this is like not mine. This is something that, it's a term that's out there, is like it's like a sixth sensor. It's like a sixth sense. It's the sixth sensory. So living in a sixth sensory way versus the fifth sensory way. So five sensory way is using just our 5 basic senses. And then living in a sixth sensory way is where we open ourselves up to that more like intuitive way of living, which has energy in it. But it's also, some people relate to intuition more than they relate to the idea of energy. It's all kind of the same. Even, I mean, I think there's studies about like top CEOs of big companies, when they like are interviewed about like how they make good decisions, they like, it's essentially intuition. It's like their gut, but they kind of keep it a secret because that's not what's, do you know what I mean? And so I think that's to me is like a sixth sensory, like it really is a sixth sense that all of us have access to, and all of us have the ability to learn how to listen to more and how to like relate with more. And you can find that within your own personal belief system and paradigm of like, how that works to you. There's not like a right or wrong way, but I do think there's just a sixth sense of that stuff beyond the five senses. So I do think it's another sense.
Cool.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, for myself personally, as I've been trying to like kind of hone my style of body work, I would say, and just in life generally, I think I'm trying to find a balance between like educating myself, learning from others, and what is like kind of like proven or like common best practice or
Yeah.
something versus developing my own intuition and finding a good balance there. Because I think that a lot of people kind of tend toward one extreme or the other, and
Yeah.
like just like leaning into intuition completely all the time maybe isn't the best thing either,
Yep.
especially if you don't have like a solid
Yep.
foundational grounding.
Yep.
So I'm curious, and something that really stood out to me, being a student of yours, is how good of a balance you seem to have between those. So I'm
Oh,
curious
thanks.
I'm curious how that's been for you to kind of cultivate that balance.
That's been my like random life of random events, I guess. But for me, my journey has been leaning more into the sixth sense. Like I started with a really grounded fifth sensory experience. And it's like my journey has been learning how to trust that other thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so I think in some ways that's made me a really healthy skeptic, right?
Yeah.
Because I've been a little bit grounded already in something, to whatever degree that balance was imperfect or perfect. But it's like, I've had a lot of kind of training or conditioning to like, look at reality, look at what's rational, look at what's that. And I've had to undo a little bit of that. But I think that's also kept me from doing just like the whole total intuition thing, of just like, my guides told me to sell all my stuff. And, just like, okay, like that's part of it. And I mean, I honestly would credit a lot of the training that I did with Rhys for actually really helping that be developed in a balanced way, because his training did not overemphasize any one like energy. It was like equal. It was like we were really taught that they're all very important, that it doesn't, a healthy chakra 1 is as important as a healthy chakra 7. And that like, the goal is balance, which is true physically, homeostasis, right? And so I would maybe credit that container of really emphasizing that it even though we're doing energy work, it's like we weren't all supposed to be up in all these high chakras all the time. We were supposed to take information in. And I think this is one of the things I was really attracted to. I know it was one of the things I was attracted to Rhys about, is that like, he's very, especially at the time that I first came across his stuff and met him, he was very authentic in terms of like, I felt like he did a lot of walking his talk, and is like, he would be a hot mess, but he'd be a hot mess like in front of you. Do you know what I mean? And it didn't detach from the times when he wasn't a hot mess, because he was actually using it as like a teaching moment or a thing of like, yeah, how many times I walk out of my house and don't have my keys, it's just like things like that, that was something that initially attracted to me. And he also had, I think I've maybe taken it on and made it mine in a bigger way, but of like, what's the point of guidance if it doesn't give you a better life? Like, what's the point of like doing all this energy work and like connecting to realms beyond here if it doesn't make your life better right now in this human experience, because this is where you are right now, right? Mm-hmm. And I would definitely say that really resonates with how that practical side of me that's like, well, let's take this woo-woo stuff, but like it's practical. Do you know what I mean? It's like the CEO who's following their intuition to make millions of dollars, that's not impractical. That's not woo-woo, right? Yeah. So I do think that the way that we were trained and introduced to that really definitely like cemented the idea of balance being important. And I continue to struggle most with letting go of control and trusting when I need to trust, right? That tends to be my biggest, like, this is the point where, I'll probably get better at it. Maybe by the time I'm like 90, I'll have it sort of figured out. I don't know. But yeah. And then part of how that grows is that every time you do that, and then it works out better than you imagined, you're like, oh, And massage was one of my first teachers of that. I think I shared that with you in school, is that like it was a very safe place for me to make relationship with my intuition.
Oh, cool.
Right. Because inside of a massage, it was like I was feeling or hearing, like having instincts or ideas that like I should work here, I should work there. And when I listened to them, it seemed like it really made the massage better. Right. And when I didn't, it's not that the massage wasn't good, but I got like it was a very risk-free place to kind of be like, I don't know if that's just my head making it up or if that's my intuition. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because then it's
Um,
like if you have the idea like, I think I should go work on their left calf, and then you do that and it wasn't necessarily the thing, it's not you just get a nice left
exactly.
calf massage.
Exactly. And if you do it, you start to strengthen your muscle of what it feels like to have relationship with that, like with that
Yeah,
sixth sense.
yeah,
And so massage was definitely like that's probably one of the biggest things massage has taught me, that I didn't know that's what it would teach me. And it just taught me that through experience almost. I didn't even have a lot of teachers in it.
yeah,
And even now it's one of the places that's probably like easiest for me. Like I don't even think about it being intuitive.
right.
It's just there. But once your life's holographic, so once you start to relate to that in one part of your life, you start to be able to like feel it in others, and you
Yeah.
can start to take it out of like the massage space. And so I actually think massage is one of the best gifts that massage has given me over all the years. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. One specific example that you gave in school that like I guess has stuck with me. I hope it's okay that I share this. Is like
Mhm.
sometimes you'll have a client, you'll do a whole intake with them, and then based on the intake, it would make sense to either start them like prone or supine, which is face up or face down.
Yeah.
But you have some intuition that like, okay, what we've talked about would suggest we should start supine, but I'm having an intuition I should start them prone.
Yep.
Don't know why, but I have that feeling. And like at some point, I guess when that would happen, you started listening to it, and like reliably when that happened, you would find
Yep.
something by starting them in that position that like if you had started the way that the intake suggested, then like you wouldn't really have had time to go into this
Yep.
thing fully. So yeah, I think that's like just a
That's a
really good
perfect
example.
example. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so simple. And
Hmm.
it's still low risk, because if I hadn't listened and I'd started supine, I probably still would have found that thing,
Hmm.
but it would have been like, oh, this is why I wanted to start prone.
Right.
Do you know
Right.
what I mean? And it still
Right.
would have built my relationship with that thing.
Yeah.
And the
Either way.
massage still would have been, yeah, either way. And the massage still would have been, it's not like it would have been a bad massage. Do
Right.
you know what I mean? It would have
Yeah.
been like maybe the difference between a good and like a great, or a great and an excellent massage. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's a exactly. That still happens to me even now,
Cool.
after years. I'm like, well, I'm going to disregard my mind and my rules and my grounded knowing
Right.
and balance it with this other thing. Yeah.
This feels like a good point for us to transition into talking about your teaching.
Yeah.
So the list I came up with for the classes that I know you teach are Swedish massage, hydrotherapy, ethics, spa, North Carolina laws and regulations, exam prep, integrative massage, and energy work.
I think that's all of them. Yes.
Yeah. Um, so one thing that stood out to me, and I think I've like to me this seems like I've barely done any teaching, but it seems to me like a commonality among really good teachers I've had is that you can tell that they've been iterating a lot the whole time that they've been teaching. Like um, there's like a level of perceptivity to like noticing how things are landing or how students tend to
Hmm.
react or what tends to stick for students, and then also soliciting a lot of feedback. And like I obviously don't know, I kind of just had you the 1 year, so
Yeah.
I haven't seen you over time, but my assumption is that like you've iterated a lot of these kind of curriculums and your style over the years, because everything just felt to me like so well oiled, and like we have the perfect ritual at the end of this class, or like just like you really figured out how to fit everything perfectly into the time that we had without running over. So yeah, I actually don't know how long have you been teaching, and how has your kind of like approach to teaching changed in that
Yeah,
time?
I started teaching the first class that I taught at the school was in February or March of 2017. So what
Okay.
is that? 5 years?
5 years.
5 years. And I taught this, that was the first Swedish. And then I taught a couple Swedish in a row, and I was working admin at the school. So like that was too much of a class to do admin and that, but I kept teaching some of the smaller classes kind of through the whole thing. And then the last 2.5 years, I've been teaching pretty much like that list or slightly shorter versions of that list for some groups, pretty full time. So I would say that I feel fortunate enough that there's like some of the teaching just comes naturally, right? Like we all have archetypes or things that we're here to do. And it's like clearly some version of that is part of me. And even when I teach massage, it's still this bigger thing I talked about earlier. Massage is just the vehicle for me to teach you self-empowerment and, like that stuff that's like really kind of makes me excited, right? Is connection and community and self-trust and confidence and, all that kind of stuff. Curriculum wise, it probably took me 2 or 3 times through a lot of the classes before I really started to get clear about like how our time, there's lesson plans that give you a suggestion of how you break your time down, but that's an iteration that you just have to like literally do it enough times to sort of get an idea of like, oh, okay, I know, like at this point, I know in the classroom that if I want this much time on the table, I have to be done talking by this time on the clock. And I also know that we can like wiggle 15 minutes either direction. And to have that kind of fluidity definitely was less fluid my first few times teaching. I've always been really anal about, even from the beginning, about people getting the same amount of time on the table. Because that was something that did not happen to me when I was in massage school, and it drove me crazy. Of the like, the first trade would get like 50 minutes and the second would get like 30 minutes. And I'm like, no. Like, so that was always something that I was just like, really paid a lot of attention to from the beginning, of really wanting to make sure that that was even. And so that kind of comfort that I have and then teaching a lot of different classes, you get a sense of what 4 hours feels like in a classroom just in general. And you get kind of a sense of what it feels like for a bodywork class, and you kind of get a sense of what it feels like for a non-bodywork class. And I would say that sense is now just kind of part of how I show up in the classroom, and that makes it feel more fluid for you all, because I don't have to think about it anymore. I can kind of like, it becomes a little bit more intuitive, if that makes sense. In terms of the curriculum, particularly with the Swedish curriculum, I think probably the thing that I got best at the very first time I remember teaching it, I remember learning how basic we needed to get with things, right? Like it taught me how many things I took for granted knowing about massage, like how to set up a massage table, how to, like just simple things that aren't, it's not insulting to teach in the first bits of class. So some people know how to do it, but some don't. And just like I learned that by like walking into walls where people was like, well, how do we do this? And then me having to be like, oh yeah, here's this thing I need to teach you, and started to get better at like, what are those things that I need to like pace until you hear. And a lot of that was just like learning what a beginner needs to know.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And so part of how you need to learn what a beginner needs to know is you need to like be in the classroom with a beginner for a little while to be like, oh, you know this, you don't know this. I think I've probably gotten to a point where, I don't remember. I've also really believed that in body work, like the more time you have on the table, the better. And so I think that over time I've gotten better at still giving the information I need to give in lectures and in talking, but maximizing time on the table, because that's when people learn the most, right?
And by that you mean trades happening between students, not you demoing?
Yes. Yeah, trades happening between students. Yeah. And the demo is important part of it, but like particularly like you at a table working on someone else or someone else working on you is like, that's where you learn the most of what's actually you're going to be using. And you have to talk about the theory, and you have to talk, there's things you have to talk about, but I think I've gotten better at like I can think of lectures that the first times I did them took me like an hour and 40 minutes to do the lecture. And then as I've gotten better at knowing like what information is have to know information, what information's like, if it comes up, it's good, like sidetrack information. And I can get that lecture done in an hour now.
Wow.
Do you know what I mean? And it's not that I talk fast, but it's not that I'm like talking more fast. I've just gotten better at condensing like what's the essential stuff that we really need to take away, you know, in this. And then I think another thing that's even now, I feel like this, like the last few classes, I feel like I've been going through like an iteration of this in a different way of learning the balance between like offering just the basics, but also offering more, because everyone's at a different learning curve in the class. And I feel like that's kind of an art form that would probably never end, you know, and figuring out how to do that, whether it's individual or with a group, or I've had some bigger classes. So that's been a different, how do I teach 18 people versus 9, right? There's less individual hands-on attention. So yeah, I think I just get more efficient. That's probably what's happened over time. And then, I mean, teaching has made my private practice like enjoyable again, because there's so many things in my private practice that it makes, I think about it through the lens of teaching. Does that make sense?
Can you
like,
give an example?
So like, there are times sometimes where it's like, I'll have had someone ask me a question about a body mechanic or a move. And so the next time I'm working, I'm thinking about what I'm doing, and I'm trying to think about how I would teach that to someone. Because it's just kind of, it's kind of what it was like the first time I taught the class, of just like, you don't know how much you know until you try to teach someone who doesn't know it. Do you know what I mean? And then there's a lot of stuff with massage. It's like, how do you figure out how to like, how can you get people to feel things in their body? How do you get things to connect? So I've added things over the years. I don't know. I think I tied people up with strings in your class, right?
You did that for me, actually. I was just telling somebody about that the other day. I don't know if you did it for other people, but
I did. And that was like, I think that came, I think with the class before you. I just had a group where it was just like, there was this very similar thing, and I had just tried all the other tools individually and collectively, that I was just like, it's not translating to them and their body. And it's not because they're not listening. It's not because they don't want to learn it. It's not for any like reason like that. So it's like, so then my job is to come up with another way to teach it. Right. And that was just, as I was like processing and thinking about it, I was like, oh, I wonder if you could do that. I still use that. And I don't do it for like, not every student needs that. Not every student needs that tool, but mostly the students that I do it, they like are kind of like, what are you doing to me? And they think it's so weird. And then they're like, oh, actually, that really helps. Thanks. So that's an example of just little things that it's like trying to figure out how to get everyone empowered to do, you know, the same thing, is probably how I've iterated the most. And every group is different. That's also, every class is so different. They need different things from you as an instructor, you know? So I think being able to like feel that, it's more intuition.
Yeah.
Like my teaching feels very intuitive to me in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah, so it sounds like there's a lot of overlap between the skill set for teaching and then the body work and energy work and healing that you do. In terms of like being a vehicle and using a lot of intuition. Do you have a favorite thing about teaching, or a least favorite thing? Anything come to mind?
I think the favorite thing, particularly in the context of like the massage school, is watching that same kind of transformational process, you know, is watching someone who's like not sure they're ever going to be able to do this, like have that massage that you're just like, it's there, you know. I think that's probably one of the most fun things. And then watching you all like out in the world, like being successful after you graduate, is also like very fun for me to just, even if it's, you don't stay in massage, you know, it's just like watching students be successful is like a very fun thing. Probably my least fun thing about teaching is like, you know, kind of navigating the like paper admin kind of regulations, like rule stuff that we have to do. And sometimes that's more burdensome than others. It just kind of depends, but it's like there's these little things that you're like, hey, practically I know that like this doesn't seem like it matters, but like it matters because we're this structure and we're this institution, we accept federal financial aid, and that kind of stuff is sometimes like it's like, well, we could just not do that, right? That would be fine. Because then there's a certain amount of kind of holding people accountable, or like babysitting a little bit more than I'd like to, but I also can't stop from doing it because it's like, no, you're going to be successful, you're going to do this. You know what I mean? So that's probably my least favorite thing, which is pretty minimal overall.
And then in terms of like, I don't know how familiar you are with other massage schools and other massage programs, but like, is there something that it seems to you from your years in the industry that can be left out of bodywork education sometimes? And you mentioned earlier, like the energy side.
Yeah, I think that at least from my experience in school, and like you said, I'm not super familiar with other programs, but just even from other therapists that I've met over the years, the things that I have put into teaching are things that I think do get left out of the conversation, which is like, I think boundaries don't get talked about enough. I think maybe they're getting talked about more even in other schools just because they're getting talked about more like collectively. But that part, I don't even remember if anyone used the word boundary with me when I was in my massage school education.
That's
and
like
I just literally,
unimaginable
that's like,
to me.
I know, exactly. So like, I think the boundaries and kind of both the energetic and emotional boundaries, it's the thing. I do one little lecture. I don't think we talk enough about kind of the shadow side of healing professions and kind of like the codependency or like controlling or manipulation or like the stuff that can happen when the good, caring hearts get kind of turned sour. I don't think that healing trades as a whole take enough responsibility for that shadow, or, call it out as a real thing that prevents the profession from being all that it can be, individually or collectively. So I think that's one thing that definitely gets left out. And I honestly think that a lot of programs don't do what they should with body mechanics. I just don't. And I like, that's one of my, in some ways I feel like it's a random gift that I have to be able to like look at someone giving massage and be like, ooh, actually you need to move your bottom foot an inch that way. Does that feel better? Like, it's kind of it feels like kind of a random gift, but I just think that like, that's one of the biggest burnout reasons in the field. It's, even with all that you get from me, the program, it's just like, I just don't think that, I don't know if there's an understanding of it, I guess, even in the most complete form, the way that I understand it. I think every place teaches you're supposed to like bend your knees and use your body, but like, it's one of those things. It's like cognitively, I can do that, but if you're not integrated in doing that, it doesn't matter that your knees are bent. It doesn't matter. There's something deeper, and I do think that that's something that gets left out of a lot of massage education. And I don't necessarily think because anyone's doing anything wrong, just because it's like, it's a tricky thing to teach like really fully and completely, like in a really fully embodied way, I guess.
Yeah, it is like a limited amount of time that we have together, and there's so much material, and like, to me, it seems like there's a lot of personal responsibility, like necessarily for the student to like take it very seriously and do all kinds of experimentation themselves and like really find what feels right for them. But I think like between how much you teach us and sort of like give feedback on mechanics, and then also just you highlighting how important it is, it really sort of drives home for the students from my perspective, like, okay, yeah, I really need to be figuring this out on a day-to-day basis every time I'm in clinic, every time I'm
And I would say that even in my time that I've been at the school, I think that's something that's had more increased focus in the curriculum, not just because I'm teaching, but because, the school's implemented things in clinic to help bring awareness to it and stuff like that. Because I do, it's a tricky one. It's a hard one, to really totally dial in, and it is part of your longevity. although there are definitely times where I'm like sometimes doing a massage and I'm like, if one of my students could see me now, like I'm breaking all these rules, you know. But even that, it's like I tell you, it's like you got to learn where your body can cheat, you know, because we're not perfect. You know, you learn what you can get away with and it not hurt you.
Right, right. If there's some kind of
Because
trade-off there where it's like, I can't do this thing perfectly, but it's like it feels important for this massage.
yeah, 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 or just everyone's body's a little bit different. So yeah, I think boundaries, the codependency, and the body mechanics are definitely things that and I personally in our program, I don't know. I think there's probably a variety in other programs. But like one thing that I wish I had learned more of in school is I wish I'd learned more about postural assessment. And like integrating postural assessment, you know, actively into a practice and using it as another tool for, you know, body awareness. Like I think that there's different modalities that really, like if you go to a school that specializes in NMT, you're probably going to learn more, you know, like structural analysis kind of stuff. But I do think that like it would be a tool set that would make, like, how do I say this? At this point, like I do what I do, right? And I've learned a little bit about different postural assessments or structural assessments here and there, but I also like have peers who do a lot more of that. And I'm amazed at what they can learn and how it you know, it gives them information about where to work on the body. And I think that if I had had that starting out, it might have been like a quicker, like there would have been a quicker integration of things, of me not just overly relying on that intuition or feeling like I don't, you know. Yeah, and I also think that there's something kind of empowering, like as massage continues to be seen, you know, more and more as this like just as like a healthcare modality, right? It's not like flu, it's not weird. It's like literally like everybody should get a massage all, you know, like at least once a month because it's like structurally really important. Is it having that kind of more like technical knowledge helps people? Do you know what I mean? Like they go to a physical therapist who's going to be able to like manually assess them. So if someone is used to that and massage is kind of a new thing, if they walk into their massage office and there's like a physical assessment that feels similar and it's helpful and in alignment with the treatment, it kind of helps like bridge that gap in some ways. So yeah, I think that's one thing that the program could, you know, and I also don't know if that's an emphasis of a lot of other just kind of generic, you know, intro to massage. Like they're not like a specialty, like some schools have kind of a specialty in their curriculum that's a little bit more structurally focused. So.
Yeah, that's super interesting. It was pretty tied in my mind specifically to like neuromuscular therapy. Do you do any like type of postural assessment now in your practice?
I like every once in a while I have, you know, I'll have someone like, you know, stand with their ankles together and just kind of let me look at something if I'm struggling with kind of getting a sense in my own kind of intuitive space. And I think that's where like my practice has developed to a point where like I'm really following that, like I think without me knowing what I'm doing, a lot of times I'm following blocked energy. So I feel structural things, but I don't have the structural knowledge. So like I trade with a practitioner who's very structurally based. And every time I give her a session, she's always like, you have like these amazing techniques that are structural. She's like, there's things she's like, can I take that from you? And I'm like, absolutely. I knew that it was structural, but I couldn't verbalize to you you know what I mean? And I think that it's fine for me in my practice, but I do think that as a like skill set for entry level therapists, that it would behoove people to have that skill set to use as they want to. It would just set you up to be more successful in a variety of environments, without like extra training, to at least have a little bit more like intro to that. Because I mean, I don't know, do you have Judy, right? If Judy,
Yep.
You know, she said 10 seconds and she can tell you a bunch about somebody.
Oh yeah,
it's kind
amazing.
of like it's kind of like an energy reading. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of
and
like,
I think she's doing it all the time, walking down the street or something.
Yep,
like
totally.
it must be amazing what she can tell just from
Yeah.
somebody who walked past her.
Yeah. So I think that's maybe an underemphasized like kind of practical skill set that is really, to me, related to the bodywork profession that would be great to have like new therapists be more grounded, or at least get an intro to it, because there's so many ways to even do postural assessment. Like there's different, like a Rolfer is going to look at a body a little differently than an NMT practitioner versus, so they're getting different information from their postural assessment. But even to just kind of have like an intro, like here's some examples of how you use this skill set, to support your massage and bodywork practice in a way that makes it like, it makes your work easier to a certain degree. Do you know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, that's a great answer. Thank you. I definitely am gonna sit with that and see how I can integrate that personally. Yeah, this feels like a good time to me to kind of transition to more general questions, I guess, like, general career topics. So this question, I think it'll probably be kind of a staple of the podcast. And the question is, what advice would you give to somebody like me, but not just me, kind of like starting a massage or bodywork practice? And having been one of your students, I know what a lot of your advice is, but like,
right.
if
I were to just meet you on the street.
Yeah.
There's a long list of it, that. So I think if I were just to meet somebody like just like getting ready to be out of school, my first advice would be to like just work anywhere. Just get your hands on bodies as soon as you can relative to your training, because your skill set atrophies pretty quickly. And it's easy to like, once it atrophies, it's harder to then feel like you have the confidence to like go in and interview for somewhere. With that being said, work anywhere, but don't feel like you're a terrible person if you decide to quit in 1 or 2 months because you've learned there's something about that environment or how you're serving, or because there's so many different pay structures and ways that massage gets set up. Like just work is pretty much like get your hands on people and then the more hands under your body, the sooner the better. I would definitely, all the stuff that we've kind of talked about a lot, I would say over the last hour or so is to pay attention to your body mechanics and to pay attention to your boundaries and be really intentional about how you set up your spaces. And, just think about it. You can make mistakes, but, energetic or otherwise, we talk a lot about at school about like separating from your clients and, how do you just have that be clean where you're not being drained by the profession, I guess. I think probably have fun, right? I think it's really easy to sometimes get into all this stuff and have it be very serious work and have it be very serious, but at the core, like there's something that can be pretty fun about massage, right? It's kind of like sometimes it feels like artwork to me, and like let it be that kind of creative artwork sometimes, and kind of whatever part of you that most people end up in massage because like more traditional like career tracks aren't satisfying them, or they have done a lot of service industry work and that environment's not satisfying them anymore. And so it's like there was something that kind of called you to this that had like energy in it. It was fun, it was playful, it was like, don't lose that in trying to like build a business and make a job and you know what I mean? Because I think people kill massage sometimes with that, right? Yeah, they kill their massage practice by kind of putting, I don't know what the right word, like too much responsibility is not that word, but like putting too much heaviness on it, it still should be kind of an adventure, right? It should kind of have that feeling sometimes still,
I wouldn't want to go to a super serious massage therapist or healer of any kind. Even like for me, when I'm working through some like trauma or something, like if there is an opportunity, whether we're in the midst of it or afterward or something, for there to be like a lightness and playfulness around it, that was a piece of feedback that you gave me in a class. I remember one time you were like,
oh, really?
you look very serious when you're giving massages. Like, oh yeah, I guess like just I do like have such a reverence for it, but I realized when you said that, like, yeah, that doesn't have to mean that I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah.
in fact, it's probably like a tension that I'm bringing to it
Yeah.
if I'm like being too serious about it.
Yeah. That's exactly kind of a good way. It's like, I like, you know, we talked about tension at the beginning, but it's like being tension for yourself makes your massage better.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that you're doing that's adding tension to your practice, change it.
Yeah.
Whether it's a mindset or I'm working too many days a week or, you know, like, because that tension actually makes giving massage exhausting,
Mm-hmm.
right? You burn yourself out.
Yeah.
Whereas like, you don't have to, you know? Yeah.
What is something that you've had to figure out on your own that you wish someone had taught you, or it would have made things kind of easier or faster?
So much of the stuff I teach now, in some ways, I feel like a lot of like the kind of the energetic boundary, the presence, the like that part of massage that's not just massage. Um, I mean, I figured most of that out on my own, and I feel really lucky. Even my body mechanics, I feel like I figured out that on my own, and I just feel like lucky that I figured it out on my own.
Wow.
I mean, I had some like I was taught to like bend my knees and stuff, but like the way that I understand body mechanics now is like I just got lucky that my body was like, this is how you do that. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think all of that could have made it easier for me from the beginning, but I also wouldn't trade my experience for something different because it's been like really appropriate
Mm-hmm.
for me to have the experience that I've had. See, is there anything else that I wish someone had taught me? I feel like it would have been maybe nice to have a little bit more of a realistic conversation around what working in the field is actually like when I was in school. And you know, that's changed over the years, but like I had no context for like what's is this what someone's pain? Is this good? Is this normal? Is this, you know, there's just no context. And all I had known before massage school was people who were in private practice. That's the only model that I had ever, you know, come across for massage. So yeah, I think that actually maybe would have helped me personally just a little bit more to have a little bit more of like a context on what to expect or how to move through that like employment process right out of school a little
Mm-hmm.
bit more smoothly. Because I kind of learned, I learned by doing things and being like, this is how they do things here. I don't want to do this, you know, like I'm going to find somewhere else to work. Like that's kind of how I learned. It's just trial and error.
And you did work at a few different places before starting your private practice.
Yeah, I mean, my private practice actually started pretty soon. I rented a space with a friend right out of school. That's a different private practice than this one. It was Massage by Martha. But I also was working part-time elsewhere, right? Because it's pretty hard to start a private practice unless you live somewhere with a lot of connections, like right off the bat, to kind of supplement income. Yeah, I worked at a couple different places, and even over the years, like having a mixture of things. The Gemini in me needs like 2 or 3 jobs, or else I'm not satisfied, right? Need the variety. Yeah, that I kind of felt like I was learning by standards, and then not even having an idea, just having like a gut feeling almost that like, well, there's got to be somewhere that pays me more than this. Do you know what I mean? Like, but not really knowing what my value was or what my worth was, and you know, kind of just like stumbled through that and stumbled through it fine. But yeah, it's like a learning curve that could have been a little less rough, I think.
Yeah. You've touched a little bit on this like energetic disconnection that you teach at the end of each session for people to implement as they wrap up a massage. Would you be open to describing that in more detail?
Oh yeah. So the thing that I use, actually, I created on my own probably after I got those books from the bookstore and was like, what is energy? And was kind of thinking like, okay, I have to do some, you know, like I need to create some kind of something to help this be a thing. So the wording that I still say today, like in my head, as I'm like finishing up a session, is I say, I release everything that's yours to you. I take everything that's mine with me. I ask the Holy Ones, spirits, and guides to remove anything from us, our bodies, our auras, or this room that are no longer serving you or I, and do with them as they see fit. May we both walk in peace and joy, love, and light. And that was just like, those were words that like resonated with me about like what my intention was, like how I wanted to like leave the session, like things that I wanted to hold an intention for that works for me. Students have come up with things that are much shorter than that, but still have, you could do anything. So that's what I did for years. And then when I started learning, I started the full spectrum healing. Our very first weekend, we learned it's an energy close that we basically do after every single, is how you close all your energy sessions. That's essentially like your hands over the sixth chakra. And you send the indigo light down and you say, may you see yourself in this new way. And you bring orange light up. May you feel yourself in this new way. May you see yourself in this new way. May you feel yourself in that way. So I'll put my hands there and I'll just do that 2 or 3 times, all silently, and then lift my hands up over the 7th chakra with white light, and we'll seal the field off. We'll seal it. We'll cut from the front of me. I'll step out of their field and then cut from the back of me and actually cut the cord of that interaction. And I started adding that to my closes, like as soon as I learned it, in addition to that words. And it felt like I was doing pretty good with those words only, but when I started adding the actual energy close, it was like, I felt a difference, like at the end of my work day pretty quickly. And I will still do it. Like, I was kind of nervous the first time I did like a couples massage at Biltmore to be like, all right, still going to do this thing, but the therapist I'm working with, like, they might think I'm crazy, but like, I'm still going to do my close. You know what I mean? It feels like another layer of that intention of like wrapping someone back in their own field and their own light and saying like, go, now go on your way. And we're going to take the experience and have a good experience, but we're not going to stay like connected to each other past this.
So what's like a difference that you felt between not doing it and doing it, or once you added the close part?
Yeah, it's been so long. I feel like way back at the beginning, it was like I would almost maybe identify it as anxiety, right? Of kind of feeling like not knowing how to end. Do you know what I mean? Like you've just kind of had this intense kind of like intimate experience with someone's like body, you know what I mean? And then how do you like leave that and then be like, hey, great, thanks for paying me, see ya. Like, I just think I kind of felt like a discomfort around that for myself, which probably had a little bit of kind of like an anxious feeling to it, because I was just like, I just feel a little uncomfortable with this and I don't quite know what's happening. And then I think starting with the words and that intention helps that be cleaner. Probably got rid of a little bit of that, like, yeah, that kind of discomfort that I would feel leaving the room and then coming back to be like, no, we're done. You know what I mean? And then I do feel like I remember feeling less tired at the end of my days once I added in the energy flows, right? Is that it was like, I felt like there was more of me kind of left at the end of the day, where I could have a busy day and just not feel, maybe like pulled in a few other directions or whatnot. And again, it's been so long. But clearly it was a big enough difference that there was no argument for me that I was going to keep doing them. If that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, the way you're describing, it helping sort of relieve that anxiety to have the formal close, it makes me think of how when we were in Swedish, I think we did this in all of the classes that you taught, we would have like a little, sometimes very short, but we always did it, have a little close out circle at the end of class, take a breath together, just sort of do it like a really short debrief. But it was like a very consistent ritual that feels similar to me.
Yeah, I've never thought of it that way, but yes, because I do think that our systems like boundaries. Our systems like beginnings and ends and knowing where we're at, right? And that, even in class, we're in mesh doing all this stuff together. It's like, okay, now this is over and you can go do what you're going to do after school today. So yeah, it always feels better to me. I do that because it feels better to me as a class. I feel like we stay together as a class more. Like the vibes of the group or something stays more like fluid and connected when we're not just like scattering right after 4 hours of body work together.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, sometimes there's a lot to process through between everything that we learned and then whatever happened during the session. This has felt like just it felt like we've kind of talked about a lot.
Yeah, I was gonna say. We have covered a lot of ground. I'm a good talker too, so.
Is there anything that feels like you'd like to add? Anything that's coming up for you that feels important or meaningful?
Yeah, I think we've covered like kind of all the bases. We've covered a lot of the bases. I think if there's maybe one thing that I haven't said that I do feel like is important to me, it's definitely kind of part of like the value set in the new place I'm opening, is just honoring like what's the easiest way to say that? Is it like, I think that as a body worker, doing whatever we need to do ourselves to really like wrap our heads around kind of almost like the perfectness of every body, right? Kind of like the sacredness of a body that someone's walking around in. And this is like a practice for me. Like we have such a kind of a body shaming, body like negative culture with so much trauma in it and so much, that's all, it's like all in our bodies, that it's like I'm not free from looking in the mirror and not liking what I see. You know what I mean? Like that's something that so much of us experience, but I feel like the massage space is like is a really important space in like not bring that in, right? And that like, I mean, I know people that are afraid to get on a massage table because of their body issues. And for me, when I step into my therapist role, like I just see like quadratus lumborum and the quads, it's like I see a body that is a kind of a physical structure, and I don't really have any judgment over the size or the shape or any of that kind of thing. And I think for me, that's always kind of been a beautiful thing to sort of experience, there. And I think it's a really important thing to cultivate, just awareness around, like as a body worker. And then especially these days with like, there's so much, all of the wonderful like variety and multidimensionality of, trans bodies and non-binary bodies and, large bodies and small bodies. And there's just all this, like, just kind of like bodies are just bodies. Right. And I think we in the massage profession have a possibility, or we have we have not an option.
Like an
opportunity. Yeah. We have an opportunity to sort of like just normalize bodies. Do you know what I mean? It's just like normalize bodies. there's not one doesn't work better than another. It's just normalize bodies. And I think that's maybe kind of an underlying thing I've always kind of believed and felt, but it's something that's coming up more recently for me. It's just, maybe it is kind of a political stance. I don't know. But I just think that I don't think there should be anything political about a body, really. It literally does, like, it's sort of this miracle that breathes and flows blood and moves, and all of our bodies are doing that all the time, and kind of fostering more like respect and just space for that, like societally, I think is a good thing. And massage is a really nice environment, I think, to foster that, and to kind of teach people that their bodies are their friends, And I say this from a very it's like I have a very high level view because I come into my own personal life and I know that I don't interact with my body that way all the time, but I really believe that that's like how we're designed to interact with our bodies, And I'm really
Yeah.
grateful for practitioners and people in my life who've helped me interact more that way with my body, over the years. So
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Thank you.
yeah.
That's where a lot of, I think, just like my reverence for it comes from, is like kind of recognizing the inherent act of vulnerability of somebody
Yeah.
coming to us and like, this is my
Yep.
body. And I guess it's not necessarily super vulnerable for everyone. It doesn't always feel that way to them, but it feels
Yeah.
like just such a privilege for me to get to
Yeah. I would agree.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And not like this is the beach body that I'm planning for 3 months from now, or this is
Yeah.
how I want to look if my hair did the thing I want it to do. But like,
Yeah.
this is my body right now
Yep.
in this moment, and being super
Yeah.
present with it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, that feels like a perfect note to end on. Thank
Yeah.
you so much, Martha. Really nice to
Well,
see
thank
you
you,
and
Jane. It
catch
was
up.
lovely to talk to you.
Yeah. All right.